Hello again and welcome to another Mordy and Glory bolt action video. In today's episode, we shall be casting our ever critical eye over another bolt action unit. And once again, we shall be heading to the Eastern War, holding the line in the Great Patriotic War and looking at some Soviet tanks. And this time, we shall be looking at one of the most iconic and infamous tanks of World War II. Nicknamed Stalin's Fridge, I am of course talking about the mighty KV-2. And so without further ado, let's go over the good, the bad, and the ugly of this Soviet tank. As is tradition, let us begin with the unit overview, starting with its veterancy and points costs. The KV can be taken as inexperienced for 240 points, regular for 300 points, and veteran for 360 points. Most bolt action players will gravitate towards taking the KV-2 as a regular unit, as a nice balance between points cost and its leadership and its ability to ignore some of the pins that can't penetrate its armor. But it should be noted that the KV-2 as veteran really isn't prohibitively expensive. For a heavy tank, 360 points is pricey, but it's not the most expensive one out there. And a lot of its contemporaries, of its rivals on the German side, will be spending a lot more than that to get the same damage value. I would say if you're playing 1,000 points, you might want to stick with the regular. But if you are playing a slightly larger game, 1250, which is a very common level to play bolt action at, you could probably happily spring for that veteran level. Now, in terms of its weapon systems, it comes with one turret-mounted heavy howitzer. Whew, that is a big beast of a weapon. It's also got a coaxial MMG, one turret-mounted rear-facing MMG, and one forward-facing hull-mounted medium machine gun. This means that in most situations, you're not really going to use the coaxial MMG because the heavy howitzer is better for killing infantry, although sometimes you just need to spray some pins down there. And the rear-facing MMG, it can fire, but often the vehicles can be facing towards what it wants to shoot. So you should be thinking the firepower you're going to get out of your standard KV-2 is going to be that heavy howitzer and one medium machine gun. However, the KV-2 does have a weapon option. Some KV-2s mounted flamethrowers in the turret. To represent this option, replace the coaxial machine gun with a flamethrower for 45 points. That is a very expensive upgrade, but it's not one that you should dismiss out of hand, because flamethrowers are widely considered to be one of the best weapons in bolt action. And yes, it is a coaxial flamer, so you will have to choose between firing the main gun and firing the flamethrower, but there will be certain situations when your tank is being threatened by pretty horrible infantry. Maybe you've got Japanese anti-tank guys that are running towards you, want to detonate themselves on your hull. Well, trying to shoot those with a coaxial machine gun, a veteran, that might not get the job done. Shooting them with your one shot from your howitzer, again, might not get the job done. But having the flamethrower will protect you against certain things like that. We've also got the fact that at close range, flamethrowers will give you a proper bit of anti-tank. Heavy howitzers, they're only pen +4, and sure, they do a lot of pins and they can pin enemy units out, enemy armored units out, but you know what's even better than that? Just washing someone down with a flamethrower and taking their enemy tank just out of the game through fear and panic. I do understand that a lot of people will hesitate to pay for the flamethrower, considering, like you said, you do have to choose to fire one or the other when it comes to it or the heavy howitzer. If it was a hull-mounted flamethrower, I think more people would be rocking and rolling with it. My thinking is, if you are playing a normal 1,000 point game bolt action, you're probably going to just stick with a regular KV with machine guns and howitzer. But if you're going up to 1250 points, you've got a little bit more wiggle room in what you can spend your points on. Then either go for a veteran KV with machine guns or go for a regular one with that flamethrower. Either way, it'll be expensive, but not so much so that it's causing you to have to cut corners elsewhere in your list. Of course, that's just my take on it. Let me know what you think down in the comments section. Have you used the KV-2 with the flamer? And if so, did you find it an auto include, a great upgrade, or did you find it more of a fun option to have and not necessary? Moving on from the weapon systems, we then have the damage value. Now, this is a KV, so naturally it's a heavy tank. So of course we have a damage value of 10 plus. This is going to make us much more resistant to the more common anti-tank options out there. Things like your anti-tank rifles and your light AT guns, and even medium anti-tank guns aren't going to have a great time when trying to hit the KV on its front armor. But interestingly, unlike the KV-1, the KV-2 does not seem to be armored all round. So be aware that side shots are going to be a threat to you. Speaking of special rules though, the KV-2 just has the 1 and it is slow, which means it only has a basic move rate of 6, and when it advances it only goes 12 inches. Now that just about covers all of the general bits and bobs about the KV, but now let's scratch below the surface. Let's do a bit more of a deep dive and look into its pros and cons. On the one hand, it is pretty bloody cheap for a heavy tank, especially considering the weapons that it is armed with. Heavy howitzers are very powerful, and it's a bit of a quirk of bolt action that they tend to actually be cheaper than things like anti-tank guns. I think it's because a lot of anti-tank guns do have rules that allow them to have half decent HE, and also, well, they've got a much greater pen power than your howitzer. But your heavy howitzer in this case is going to be putting down a 4-inch template. That's the biggest one you can get. And so if it hits enemy infantry, it's going to annihilate them. It doesn't matter whether they are the most souped up veteran squad or pure bloody raw conscripts, they're all going to get killed on a 2+ when this thing hits them. Even armor is not going to be happy being hit by the KV's heavy howitzer because of the amount of pins that you can put on them. You don't necessarily need to destroy an enemy tank in order to make it combat ineffective. You can just stack so many pins on it that it spends most of the game rallying or desperately firing off wildly inaccurate shots thanks to all the pin markers that have been stacked onto it. This makes the KV-2 very, very flexible, and so it can handle the majority of battlefield situations. It's also cool that it isn't a slow load vehicle. It might be slow, but it's not slow load. This means that if you pull the first dice out the bag in a turn and you really need that KV-2 to go first, you absolutely can do without having to resort to some lieutenant shenanigans like you need to with the IS-2. And another good thing about this unit is it's got a howitzer, which means that even if your opponent tries to go down with his infantry to spoil your shot, you can always fire it indirect and start dialing it in. And most importantly, it's bloody cool. It's a giant howitzer in a big giant box on a big old tank. You slap this thing down the table, you're going to feel good rolling it around the table, and it might even be genuinely intimidating to your opponent. If they haven't brought the tools to deal with something like this, if they're expecting more meta armor, which tends to be lighter with machine guns, then they really might struggle with the KV, especially if it's got a flamethrower in there, especially if it's dialing in indirect shots with its big old howitzer. However, it's not a perfect unit. It does have some disadvantages. All action tanks, competitively speaking, tend to be small, light vehicles with lots of machine guns that are cheap. The reason for this is it means you can tend to take one of them and an armoured car on your list and still have plenty of points left over for all of your infantry. Also, they're not so much of an investment. KV-2 is a big beast, but it can still be one shot. Someone gets a lucky pop with even just a medium anti-tank in the front, they get that 6 to glance and they roll that 6 on the damage table, well, vehicle's going to be on fire and it very well may be knocked out. Or someone just gets a side shot on you, penetrates and blows you up. Now, losing a 300 to 400 point tank, depending on if you've gone veteran flamethrower, to one shot can be game losing on its own. Losing a 70 to 100 point tank, fine, you can carry on without really any dramas. Another issue is that it's not the only tank that can do this, and it's also not the cheapest. If you head over to the Brits, they can take the Churchill AVRE. That comes in at 290 points. Sure, it's only 10 points cheaper, but it is a point saving, and it's a heavy tank, it's got machine guns, and it's got a turret-mounted heavy howitzer. There are some nuances regarding its petard mortar, but by and large, it's going to do exactly the same thing that the KV does, except it's just going to do it for a little bit cheaper and therefore be a bit more efficient. And the last issue is that there are German tanks, which this thing is going to go up against it, which are cheaper, that can match it and sometimes even outclass it. A good example of this is your bog standard basic bitch, Panzer IV, 245 points, and it comes with a heavy anti-tank gun. Now, the KV might be able to bounce off light AT, it might be able to bounce or at least not feel super threatened by medium AT, but the moment we start getting into heavy anti-tank, this thing is going to be under risk, severe risk. On the front, you're going to be looking for, at the front and from long range, you're still going to get penetrated on a 6, glance on a 5. And bear in mind that we're talking about a heavy anti-tank gun. It's probably not going to be firing at long range. One of the biggest advantages that German armor has is that they tend to be able to get into that half range with their big punchy AT guns relatively easily. So actually, you're not looking at getting glanced on a 5. You're looking at getting glanced on a 4 up and penetrated on a 5 or a 6. Suddenly, 50% of the shots that hit this KV are going to do some kind of damage to it, statistically speaking. And bear in mind that the KV is a very, very big vehicle. So in order for it to claim the 50% obscured required for it to benefit from cover, it's going to have to be a pretty bloody big bit of cover because of that giant box on top of it. So you might find that vehicles which, like the Panzer IV, which are cheaper than it, can just get into a straight up fight with it and beat it. It's not really a tank v tank thing. It can try and pin them out, but sometimes pinning them out isn't enough. Sometimes you need to be able to kill that enemy vehicle, and if you haven't got the penetration to back that up, you're going to struggle. So the KV-2 is a good heavy tank, but it can be threatened by well-equipped medium tanks. Overall, I think the KV-2 is a very interesting unit. It's a bit of a meme, but it is totally usable on the tabletop. Somewhat like the IS-2, I think it falls into that category of heavy armor that's actually usable. You can put it down, have fun with it, and not feel like you're wasting your time or just having a bit of a joke. It is, however, a bit limited in terms of its tank-on-tank capabilities, and some fairly common German armor will be able to counter it. Of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Are you a fan of the KV-2, or is there another Russian vehicle that you prefer instead? And if so, let me know which one it is, and I'll consider doing a video on it. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last, but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, and they have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a big shout out to Bon Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Thank you guys so much. Your incredible generosity is a massive part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time, and it is a big driving force behind the channel. But I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.